So what's in your wallet? You're saying none of your business, right? What's in my wallet? So knowing you'd feel that way, I made sure there was something in my wallet, because there's not always, in this day of credit cards and debit cards, not always something there. But I made sure that there was something in the wallet today to show and tell. And it's a $20 bill that still has Jefferson on it at this point. And on the back, I had to check to make sure, wasn't sure it's still there, but yes, at least the one I'm holding still says what on the back? In God we trust. And our culture would say, not so much. We trust this stuff. This is what you need. And a lot of it. What's in your wallet today? 3 years ago, we were appointed to the First United Methodist Church of Crane, 30 minutes south of Odessa. You may have never been there. You basically don't go to Crane unless you're going to Crane. And there aren't a lot of reasons to go to Crane, but you might have gone past it on the interstate. And so I wasn't from there, I was from Lubbock. And so Crane's not that far from Lubbock, but it's a whole different world. And so trying to fit in my new charge, I noticed that we had ranchers in the congregation. So I went up to one of the ranchers. He seemed friendly enough. And I said to my rancher friend, I said, so, how many cattle do you have? Seemed like a good question. He's a rancher. He's got cattle. I need to ask, how many cattle do you have? Well, he laughed at me. That happens a lot when you move to a new charge. He laughed at me, and he put his big arm around me and carried me to the side, and he said, you're not from around here, so let me give you some friendly advice. He said, first of all, don't ever mess with a rancher's hat. And yes, I'd already done that too. I had seen his hat on the coat rack, and I had tried it on my head. He let me know, don't ever do that around here. Don't mess with the rancher's hat. And second, he said, don't ever ask, how many cattle do you have? He said, we don't ask that question here. He said it would be just like me coming to you and saying, hey, Scott, how much cash is in your checking account? Well, I understood what he was saying. I appreciated his friendly advice. But the truth is, I still wanted to know, how many cattle does he have? Because we do want to know. You, and let's just own it, we are fascinated with money. And all the stuff that goes along, we want to know. What's in your wallet? We want to know, don't we? It's kind of the way that we're built. And so in the gospel reading today, the parable that Robert read to us, we understand when this man wants Jesus' help about this inheritance issue, we get it. It's money. Of course that guy wants his brother to share the inheritance. Of course. Well, Jesus is smart enough not to get roped into that family squabble. But Jesus does offer a little friendly advice. We're just kind of on the outside of the story, can we listen? Can we overhear the friendly advice that Jesus gives to this guy? Because what Jesus is warning him about is something that will kill your soul. Your soul has an enemy. We don't like to talk about it much these days in our sophistication, in our education. But your soul has an enemy that wants to kill it. And here's one of the ways that will kill your soul. It's not money, by the way. It's greed. Jesus says in that 12th chapter of Luke, be on guard. Watch out! Because greed, not money, let me be clear, Jesus is not preaching against money. It's the greed that Jesus says will kill it'll slaughter your soul. And it still will today. Now, I'm going to just confess, when I read this parable about a man who had his great harvest, and he said, I got so much harvest, I need bigger barns, and so he's building barns and he's projecting into the future, I kind of said, well, that's a good thing. What's wrong with this? Harvest is good. That's a good thing. Production is up. That sounds like the American way to me. Jesus, what in the world could you be opposed to in the fact that it's working? So many things around us don't work anymore, but this is working. The harvest worked, and so we need storage space. What's wrong here, Jesus? I want to tell you there's absolutely nothing wrong with a good harvest. Man, I am praying for, I am hoping for a great harvest here. Nothing wrong with that. Problem is not that there was a harvest. Problem is not that this guy wanted to build bigger barns. That's what you would do when you have a big harvest. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what's wrong with this picture? It's that there is no space for God. Did you notice in the parable? Not one other person is mentioned. This guy is thinking about the harvest and the barns and what else? Well, he's thinking about eating and drinking and making merry, but there is not a single other person mentioned in the parable. Nobody. It's just him. And that is what's wrong with the man that Jesus called a fool. He's not bad because he's rich. Jesus isn't opposed to the rich. Jesus is opposed to those who are not rich towards God, meaning they don't have any space or time for God. And that's this man. No one else is mentioned. It's just him. One of the old theologians of the church, Augustine, and then it later gets communicated very clearly in Martin Luther. He called sin being coiled up, being curved into yourself. What a brilliant picture of sin. Sin is to be so consumed with me, that I don't see anyone else around me, and I can't see God because I'm staring at my navel. That's sin. To be completely unaware that there is another dimension and I'm just thinking about my day-to-day. I go to work, I do my thing, I take care of my stuff, that's all good. There is nothing wrong with that horizontal dimension. One commentator has said, it's that there's no vertical dimension in this story. God is the vertical. He's not angry with this man because of the horizontal, the harvest, the barns. He's rejecting this man, calling him a fool, because there's no vertical. There's no dimension with God. I want to ask you, what do you get when you allow the vertical dimension of God to intersect with the horizontal dimension where we all live every day? What do you get? A cross. So let me suggest to you that Jesus Christ, when he became flesh and dwelt among us, John chapter 1, verse 14, when we beheld in him the glory of the only Son of God, Jesus is the perfect intersection of the vertical dimension of God and the horizontal dimension where we all live. So I want to ask you, are you letting that intersection happen in your life? Or is it just the horizontal? The fool in the parable is a fool not because he's rich, but because he leaves no space for God. His money is not the problem. It's his bankrupt soul that is the problem, because it's devoid of God's presence. I want to ask you this morning, what's in your wallet spiritually? Is there room for God? Are you allowing the intersection, the cross, to impact your life? Jesus says in that 15th verse that our life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Man, that hit me hard this week. I have to admit, I'm in trouble with the gospel this morning. Are you? When it gets to that part, as long as he's talking about greed, I can pretty much push that. But when he begins talking about the abundance of possessions, I'm the guy that just moved here from Crane. I rented the biggest U-Haul truck they make, and my abundant possessions would not all fit in the truck. I had to leave stuff in Crane. We are not our possessions. We are not what we have accumulated. The only thing that gives identity and value to us is God, the vertical dimension. And when He intersects the horizontal dimension where we all live, then we form the cross of Jesus Christ. That is the intersection of our identity and the place where we derive our value. So I want to ask you again this morning, are you letting that intersection happen in you? We all remember Wesley's famous sermon. 3 points about money. Wesley said we should make all we can. Did the fool do that? He did. He made all the harvest he could make. So, point number 1 of Wesley's sermon, the foolish rich man he's doing well. Point number 2 of Wesley's sermon, so we make all that we can so that we can save all that we can. Did the foolish man do that? He did. He was saving. He was in accumulation mode. So far, this guy's pretty Wesleyan. He's doing exactly what Wesley said. He's made all he can. He's saving all he can. He's a Wesleyan. He's one of us. Awesome. Until you get to that last point. Remember the last point? We're making all we can. God's not opposed to riches. We are saving all we can so that we can what? Give all we can. And that's where the rich man becomes a fool. I thought the Gospel of Matthew said you aren't supposed to call people a fool. But Jesus said this, not me. And he is a fool because while he has made all he could and saved all he could, the third point shows where he has gone completely off the track because he has no intention of giving. It's all for him. There's not even a mention of a family member that's going to be in on the receiving. He is just about himself. And that is what makes him foolish, but it's where you and I can become people of God's kingdom. If we can get to the third point of the sermon, saving so that. It's the so that makes us people of God's kingdom, so that we can give. I wish we had time to go around the room this morning. People who study church tell us that's what we need to be doing. Less of me yakking and more of you sharing. Go around the room and find out what happened in your life this week where you had the opportunity to do point 3, give. And it's not just money. It can be time. It can be the gifts that God has given you, the abilities, the spiritual abilities that God has gifted you with. What have you done this week to separate yourself from this treadmill of accumulation that will kill us in our spiritual souls? Got a phone call this week from someone in this congregation who had noticed that someone else in our community has a need, and she said, we will fix this in as much as we can. We can't fix everything, but what we can do, we will do. And so she made a plan. She gathered friends and resources, and this afternoon, she is going to help meet a need. And I said to myself, that is God's kingdom at work. What about you? What about the rest of us? Can we allow God's love to define our wealth? It's not what's in my wallet. It's what's in my heart that God has placed there. It's not designed to be hoarded and held to me. It's designed to flow through me, to flow through you into the lives of those who are around us. And by definition, that is God's kingdom. Let's be kingdom people as we allow God's love to flow through us. What's in your wallet?